how you'll grow, who you'll meet, and what they know. Right here on the Friends with Jar show. Welcome and thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Ebony Greenfield. I'm live here with my very good friend Grant. Now, Grant is a sports major over at U of H, and he absolutely loves sports. This week, we're going to be discovering and talking about NIL because here's what we all want to know. What in the NIL is going on? And how does my degree benefit from it? So without further ado, Grant, how are you today?
Pretty good. Can't complain. Just
Awesome.
getting started on the day.
Okay. So you were telling me you know a lot about sports. I'm just going to shut up and let you talk. So take the floor, Grant.
Sure thing. So I guess I'll start off by explaining what NIL is. Uh, so the NIL rules that have been put in place recently were basically what they do is they allow the legal and within like the rules of the NCAA use of players' public image and likeness to go and be compensated accordingly. But prior to that, players were not allowed, and that was a violation. You know, you'd see teams get like severe penalties. Sometimes have to vacate games for playing players who had accepted any type of compensation. Like a lot of student athletes aren't even allowed to get like an on-campus job. Like it was super strict. And then the I don't know if it was the Supreme Court. I want to say it was a Supreme Court case, but basically our government rescinded those or called those rules unlawful. And violated antitrust and got rid of them. And so they passed this new legislation to allow for athletes to be compensated and receive revenue for their name, image, likeness. And it's become extremely high profile because of the impact it's had both on the sports and the industry that surrounds it. So, like a prime example of this was for like college football, their video game that EA Sports puts out or did put out every year. Really called NCAA football, whatever the year is, was one of the most popular and best-selling games they had. It was beloved; everyone would play it, and because of the restrictions on NIL, they had to stop making the game because it was viewed that they were profiting off these athletes' images, and there was a whole lawsuit and court case and stuff. And so, with the passing of NIL, we can have that game happen again. So I know a lot of fans would be excited to see that. It's been I think they're currently working on a new one. So that's one example of how it affected it. Another example is with the addition of this thing called the transfer portal. So before, if a student athlete wanted to transfer schools, there was a lot of like rules and hurdles they had to jump over to be eligible to play. So for example, some conferences didn't allow inter-conference transferring. So if like, for example, say you played at Alabama, and you wanted to transfer to Georgia, you would not be allowed to because Georgia's in the same conference. Also, if you do transfer somewhere, you would have to sit out an entire season before you become eligible. And all this, which was good for coaches, you know, for their roster construction or whatever, not having to fear losing their whole team. But now they have this thing called the transfer portal where athletes can put their name in the portal, and coaches can look in the portal to find athletes. Basically, they digitized the process and made it super easy.
Wait, Grant. They
Yeah.
really switched up everything. Wow.
Yeah, it's wild. And now, not only that it's a much easier process, but on top of that, they removed the restriction of having to sit out a year, and now athletes that transfer are immediately eligible to their school. There's a few small exceptions, like if you transfer multiple times, like I want to say it's like if you transfer, then you immediately transfer again, then you have to apply for a waiver to be eligible. So there are some rules that still apply, and there's always been the rule that graduate transfers, if you already have your degree, you can transfer because not every school has a good grad program for maybe the degree that you were pursuing. So a lot of those still exist, but they're not as relevant anymore because now, like, you don't have to be a senior, you don't have to have graduated to have that immediate eligibility. So with the transfer portal, athletes are transferring all over the place. We're having every year we re-break the record for the amount of transfers, and it's huge. And so teams are having these full roster makeovers. Teams that are able to rise up super fast because they just put the other team through the transfer portal, and it's had a huge impact on the sport. And also, it's impacted the coaching, because a lot of coaches that are not fans of the change are now either leaving, retiring, getting fired, struggling, and having their job security questioned because they're not as successful as before these rules are placed. It's just a whole new landscape.
Okay, so Grant, you mentioned Alabama. Now, that's over there with Coach Nick Saban. I love him. Roll Tide. However, Saban doesn't seem too happy about what's going on with NIL. I think, if I'm not mistaken, people went to Alabama for football because they honestly, loved the school and everything that Alabama, previously had to offer, before the NIL money. So what do you think about, that?
So basically, I think what's happening is we're transitioning into like I said, an absolute new landscape in collegiate sports. And so it does not surprise me at all that basically the people who previously on top, so like you used the example of Nick Saban in Alabama, he's won multiple national championships. He's had a dynasty for the last decade. They've been very, very dominant. The SEC as a whole, I mean, their championship game is basically a playing game into the national championship game. Like every year you have an SEC team right there or in the running. They've been clear and head the best conference in college football, and it's not even really a debate.
Seriously, Saban lost number one cornerback Travis Hunter of Georgia last year to Sanders. Basically over an NIL deal. Deion Sanders over at Jackson State. I love Jackson State as well. But yeah, Nick Saban literally lost someone over the NIL money, and then Deion Sanders turns around and transfers, to Colorado. This guy literally wanted to go to Alabama, didn't pick Alabama because of money, picked someone else, and that coach leaves.
And yeah, and that's why, and so that's where the coaches take an issue, and they think that it'll impact their recruiting efforts and impact their ability to construct their rosters. But at the same time, coaches have always been able to leave and get out of their contracts and leave on a whim and get better opportunities, which is well within their rights. I don't have any issue with that, because at the same time, like if you were to work your desk job, they wouldn't stop you from going and getting a different desk job that pays better, right? There's nothing wrong with getting better work opportunities, but it would leave the athletes like that got recruited to school, went to the school solely to play for that coach, be coached by that coach, improve their game, especially if they have professional aspirations. They want to make it in the pro league, and they're like, this coach will prepare me for that setting. And then the coach just up and leaves. And they're just left stranded. There's nothing they can do about it because the rules don't allow them to move. So your point about the player going to Jackson State for Deion Sanders and Deion Sanders leaving, well, now with these new rules in place, he can easily just follow his coach. He can transfer to wherever Deion Sanders went. There's no restriction stopping him if that's what he chooses. Or he could even transfer to Alabama if he wants to go to Alabama, because he's not going to have to sit out a year. He'll be immediately eligible. And he can also pursue NIL opportunities there, because what it really has done is, and this is, I think, a huge reason why the SEC in particular has an issue with it, is it's increased the parity. Any team that has the ability to secure an NIL landscape at their school can now put together competitive rosters and actually be a competitive team in their respective sport. When before, those SEC schools were able to just dominate and gobble up every 5-star player, and they would all go get dispersed, and the rest of the country was just fighting for the scraps. So with this change now, it's more even, it's more, fair across the board. And this is evidenced by even just look at college basketball this year. The NCAA tournament, we had 2 1 seeds lose within the first weekend. We've had multiple upsets. Teams that some people probably never heard of go on runs, and it's been increasing year to year. 5 years ago, we had the first ever 16 seed upset of 1 seed. It had never been done ever since the tournament expanded to 68 teams. It finally happened 5 years ago, and we just had it again this year with Fairleigh Dickinson. So we're seeing an increase in smaller schools being more competitive and actually having a fighting chance when they compete against these big schools, because the big schools and the big schools still have a competitive advantage because they have, big money, big donors in order to secure those NIL deals, but it's not a guarantee like before. It kind of brought the behind the scenes of recruiting to the forefront, because now it's public, it's legal. It's not happening behind closed doors and shady situations where we're finding out about it years down the road, because it's now perfectly allowed within the rules. And on top of that, we're not going to see another instance of, like, say, the big scandal like with the death penalty with SMU, where their whole program got shut down because of paying players and whatnot. Or the LSU situation where his coach was caught on videotape saying we'll up his offer. He got a really good offer, I think is what he said. Stuff like that won't happen, and because it's now allowed, and because those scandals aren't happening, those problems are a big issue with that was when schools would break the rules and then get punished by the NCAA, because it would take the NCAA oftentimes years to do their investigation and find all this information out. When they come down and bring down the punishment on the school, they're oftentimes punishing athletes that did not break the rules. So player X accepts money, gets the school into trouble. By the time the school gets punished, player X has graduated, moved on, and player Y, player Z is the one having to pay the price for it. So by making this all above board and legal, it's good for the students, it's good for smaller schools, and it prevents athletes from being punished for stuff they didn't do. So it's just a net positive.
So I'm looking over some of the college basketball NIL rankings, and these numbers are astronomical, but also I can see why they are being paid so much. So between Hansel Emmanuel, Shaq's son, Drew Time, and let's just say Marcus Sasser, those are like 4 or 5 players. They're literally almost getting, no, not in Houston. Well, let me see. Actually,
no, Marcus Thatcher plays for Houston.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, Marcus Thatcher is. Yeah, he's at your school, and then Shaq's son is here at TSU. So, but the other people, they don't go to. They're like in Florida. But I was just naming it. Okay, so let's just do our school and your school, right? So now we literally have 2 players that's making almost a $1 million, in NIL. And I know at first it sounds, like a crazy number, but when you look at their social media. Did you know that Shaq's son has almost 1 million followers, over 3 million TikTok followers, and over 3,000 Twitter? And then with Marcus Sasser, he has over 25,000, followers on Instagram and 5K followers on Twitter. So I really do think, that on top of them being good at sports, they also have to be able to, successfully balance a social media account as well. With you being a student over there, Grant, do you have a hard time already balancing your regular life and then your social media?
I do. It takes a lot of work, but the thing is with especially with this generation, we grew up with social media. It's become like a second language to a lot of us. So it is a lot of work to develop a social media following and maintain, but a lot of people are going to do it as a hobby for fun. Like, it's already happening, and what this change really does is allow people that are putting the work in and growing that social media following to be able to profit from it, rather than just have their social media following profit to school. Because if Marcus Sasser wasn't allowed to make money, his 25K followers would still be getting alerts about the program, would still be maybe hearing about games, maybe buying tickets, maybe buying merchandise, because he'd be tweeting that stuff. And that money wouldn't be going to him, it'd be going to the school. So it brings the revenue as more of a share versus it just only going to the school and its, board and whatnot.
Okay. So, Grant, did you ever play any sports?
Did I ever play sports?
Yeah.
Yeah. I ran cross country and track in high school. And I grew up playing basketball. I played all the way up until high school. And I played football up until middle school, and then I did some youth soccer. So I played a lot of sports growing up,
So,
but I
okay.
never.
So, Grant, let's be real. Do you think that if you would have known at, let's just say 17, okay, that if you would have loved your sport a little bit more, it could have possibly made you $1 million into your college years? Do you think you would have maybe stuck to that sport? Like, it almost makes me wonder, now are people sticking to sports in hopes for, the NIL money, or are they still focusing on
And,
sports because they love it?
and that's another issue that doesn't get enough attention because a lot of people focus on the transferring and the recruiting, but you make a really good point about how the monetary incentive, especially again, I'll focus on basketball because that's my area of expertise. Basketball players are the highest paid athletes of the major sports in the U.S. by a large margin, and it's only going up. You have players in the NBA making $40-50 million a year. So with the ability to make money in college with NIL as well, and also the NBA set up their G League Ignite team, you have the Overtime Elite program going on. So these alternatives, so athletes aren't forced to go to school. They can go play a year there and then enter the draft and be paid while they're doing that. Is definitely probably an incentive, especially for parents, to push their kids towards focusing on just one sport because there's real money at it, and they want it. It would make a lot of sense for them to be primarily focused on that sport. But a underlying problem that's being researched right now is that studies show that athletes who focus on just a singular sport at a young age are much, much more likely to suffer from injuries. And this is what's been happening. Yeah, this is what's been happening. Like the NBA, you've seen a lot of players get injured, and it's been a huge, huge issue the league's been struggling with load management and getting the star players to play. And they're trying to figure out why this is such a problem because it wasn't a problem. You had stars of the '90s playing all 82 games, and even me growing up in the early 2000s, like if you were to buy a ticket to a Lakers game, you knew Kobe was going to be there and playing.
Yeah.
And now, if I go to a Lakers game, I have no idea if LeBron's going to be there. I hope he's going to be there, but who knows? If I go to a Clippers game, I could probably bet that Kawhi's not showing up. He's probably got better stuff to do.
Yeah.
And so it's a real
Because
issue.
LeBron will say, LeBron will be like, I don't want to play today. I need a mental break. And the truth is that LeBron, baby, people have literally worked and did whatever they could to get the money to be here in this game.
Well,
it's like we want LeBron and all of our players, to be at every single game, I get it. So, Grant.
Yeah, it's definitely frustrating.
But you know what? It's all a part of the game. It's all a part of the love. And I think that, honestly, I'm excited to see where, sports can kind of go. Now, with your degree, how do you think your degree fits in the NIL space?
So, as a journalism major, and I'm focusing on sports journalism primarily, like I want to be a basketball writer, follow teams very closely. I'm probably going to focus on the professional side, but you never know what jobs you're going to line up. So I'm probably going to do some writing about college as well. It's going to be very key to understand the ins and outs of the NIL because it'll help with reporting, help with tracking trends, analysis, and data, and all that stuff because it's where the game is headed. And that goes back to one of my earlier points is like the focus on the future of the game is one of the key talking points right now because perfect example. So legendary Hall of Fame basketball coach for Syracuse, Jim Boeheim, just retired. And when asked about it during the season, they were asking if he was going to retire at the end of the year. He went on a huge rant to ESPN about NIL and how he has a huge issue with it, and he feels like he morally would never partake, and no one on his team is making more than $20,000, and that all these teams are just buying teams, and that's why they're successful. And he said that's where the game's headed, and he's disgusted by it. And he alluded to that being the reason why Coach K of Duke and Jay Wright of Villanova also retired. So we're having these legendary coaches, pillars of the sport, leave because they don't see a future, or their legacy is already secure and they don't want to see their legacy damaged by having reduced results. And so with that being where the game's headed, it's an issue like, I think NIL is definitely a net positive, but if it needs to be fine-tuned and worked on because it is brand new. It's not in the final form.
You're right.
To make sure we don't lose these great talents.
It's really like a trial and error type thing, really. You know what it is, Grant? That's really all it is. We literally just have to, throw it out there and kind of just hope for the best. The good thing is that, I would love that, shoot, my 19-year-old, if he were to go to college and I don't have one right now, not yet, but when he turns 19, if he goes to college and he gets 1.3 million in sports, absolutely. He deserves it, so let him play because it's not even a guarantee that these kids are going to go off to the pro. I mean, come on, let's be real, Grant. A lot of these kids are really, just popular and they do bring in money to wherever they attend, so that's what I love for them.
Yeah, and that's exactly why this is so great because it allows for exactly like you have it is so unbelievably hard to make it as a professional athlete. Like the odds of that happening are so slim. It takes so much luck and perseverance and hard work, and it just doesn't happen to everyone. It's very, very hard. There's so many people that are even successful and talented and good enough to do it, and it just doesn't work out. You have guys who have fantastic college careers, become superstars in college, go off to the pros, don't amount to anything. Their career's over before it even started. And they didn't get that $100 million contract from Team X because they didn't have the career that was able to get that. So being able to secure this money now when they're at their peak and they're at their peak in popularity, it will allow them to get that financial freedom that maybe previously wouldn't have been accessible, especially if they weren't going to be going on to a, super luxurious professional career. On top of that, another great thing that's come from it is a lot of people don't know this, but the Ivy League as a conference does not offer athletic scholarships. It's been that way since their founding. It's in their rules, all that. And they were able to, and this was allowed because of a specific exemption they had from the Supreme Court to allow them to not do this. But now, because of the NIL stuff, there's been a lot of pushback. And when that exemption expired, they didn't get it renewed. And now there's currently a lawsuit from Ivy League athletes saying that what they're doing by not allowing athletic scholarships is violating antitrust and is hindering the athletes. And so we could really see here in the next few years a change to that rule. And now you're going to have so many student athletes to play a wider range of sports in the Ivy League be able to pay for their school now, which would have previously never been accessible. And that will help secure them for their life. And that, so, yeah.
Well, Grant, I do want to say thank you so much for everything. You have helped me way more than you know. And I know for a fact you have helped our listeners. Like, dude, if they were not informed about the NIL and where their degree can fit in, they should definitely know by now. Thank you so much. All right, Grant.
Thank you for having me on.
No problem. You'll never know how you'll grow, who you'll meet, and what they know. Right here on the Friends with Jara show.